All right, welcome to my vision lecture. So today we're going to talk about the structure and function of the eye, along with talking about how external stimuli, light, is translated into signals that our brain can process. So let's first start off by looking at the structure of the eye. So on the MCAT, we do need to know the basic structures of the eye. And so with the outer layers, we have the cornea, sclera, choroid, and then we have the retina. And so you can kind of see that here. I always like to supplement my lectures with a video, with some sort of video or image. And so you can see that we have the cornea, the outside, then we have the sclera, then we have the choroid, and then we have the retina. Okay, so let's take a look now at how that light passes through the eye. So the cornea and lens bend light to focus the image. So we can see that here. The cornea is right here, right? And lens, it helps to focus the light, while the controls the pupil. So iris is kind of like a muscle that controls the pupil and that controls the amount of light that's entering. So when you went for an eye checkup, you might have gotten your eyes dilated, right? And so, the pupil will allow a lot of light to come in so that the physician can also examine your eye more closely, right? And so that has to do with kind of relaxing the iris or that muscle that's there. Now, another component of the eye that we need to know is the aqueous and the vitreous humor. So the aqueous humor maintains that convex shape of the cornea. That's very important to know that the cornea um, has that convex shape, same as the lens, right? It has that convex shape. It's essentially a convex lens, and eventually, if you go to the chemistry and physics section, I'll be posting. It also will have be talking about what type of system that is. We also have the vitreous humor. So vitreous humor is behind the pupil, and that maintains the shape of the entire eye. Now, on the MCAT, you can very easily encounter some sort of passage as well that relates to conditions, any type of condition, any types of abnormality, right? And so with the eye, we have near and farsightedness. You might be familiar with myopia, and that's when the eyeball is too long, so the light is focused in front of the retina, so like maybe right here. And hyperopia is where the light is focused behind the retina, so somewhere here, because the eyeball is too short. Okay, but regularly we want the light to be focused exactly on the retina, especially at the fovea, right, where there's the most amount of photoreceptors, and we'll look at that in just a moment as well. So, talking about photoreceptors, there are two major types of photoreceptors. So you have rods, which are found in the periphery. It's responsible for black and white vision, like at night, and it has low resolution. Okay, so it would be found if you go back to this image, it would be found around, still on the retina, but not exactly on the fovea. And then if we're looking at the cones, they are found in the fovea, right? It's really densely populated around the fovea. It's responsible for color vision, and it has high visual acuity, right? Because we need that acuity in order to distinguish between different colors. Okay. Here you can look at an example image of what a rod and a cone will look like, but they are different. Okay. So now let's take a look at our visual pathways. Let's combine all of that together. How is light translated into images that our brain can process? So to start off, right, we've already talked about the structure of the eye. So now we're just going to look at, okay, what happens when light hits the retina? So when light hits the retina, right, for sure, it travels through the cornea, right? So that is pretty self-explanatory. But when it hits the retina, which consists of rods and cones, it will then travel to the bipolar neurons or cells, and then it will travel to the ganglion cells. So that's something that's very important, is that the retina is like right here, right? Because the photoreceptors are located on the retina. So you might be thinking, wait a second, what is happening? Light is traveling this way and then coming out this way. So it's like inside out, right? Why is that happening? Why doesn't light get processed in the ganglion cells. That is strange, right? So it's important to remember that light is going towards the retina, hits the retina, and then is processed kind of like inside out, right? It like then moves outward. So it's a little bit strange, but that's just how the eye works. So we got through the first three steps. Now, let's take a look at what happens afterwards. So then the signals will travel through the optic nerve. So we can see that here. This is the optic nerve, right? The optic nerve. And then it passed the optic chiasm. So that's like the intersection, right? Then after that, it travels along the optic tract right here, and it hits the LGN or passes the LGN. LGN stands for the lateral geniculate nucleus. Afterwards, it will reach the occipital lobe, and that's where the visual cortex is located. All right. So remember, once again, light hits the rods and cones, which are the innermost layer of the retina. It can sound weird, but it hits the innermost layer of the retina and it gets processed inside out. So now the last thing I want to look at is types of visual processing, right? So we process visual information, but how do we do that? And what distinct features are unique in humans? So we possess the ability to do parallel processing. So this is when we can take in the shape, color, size, motion of all of the visual representation. Okay. So if we have a car that's moving left to right, we're not just seeing how fast it moves. We can see, oh, what is this type of car? Is it a Camry? Right? What's the color of a car? Is it a gray Camry? A blue Camry? Right? So we can take all that in at once. Now, something else that we possess is called feature detection. And so this is when neurons respond to multiple features of a stimuli. So that means that there are specific neurons that are responsible for detecting certain edges, right? And so that helps us build that form, right? It allows us to recognize what object we're looking at. Okay, so feature detection. Think about the features of the image that we're looking at. Edges, the shapes, the corners. All right, so that is all for vision. Good luck, and I'll see everyone in the next video.